Would you get out of here? Sorry, guys. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Online Church with Faith Fellowship Church. I'm Pastor James. Glad that you're joining with us this morning. I don't know if you're joining us for the first time or maybe you've been attending Faith Fellowship for a long time, but I'm glad you're with us this morning. We're starting to get into this series, The Bad Guy. I've been talking about the bad guys that took part in Jesus' death, and I want to see what we can learn from their stories. You know, it's really easy to look at something that somebody does on a page and see the horror of it, see the evil of it. But what I want to do in this series is take a really good hard look to see what we can learn personally from some of these guys' stories. Last week we looked at Judas. This week we're looking at the man who tried to keep everybody happy, Pontius Pilate. I don't know if you know Pontius Pilate, if you know his name, but Pontius Pilate was the man who had the authority to set Jesus Christ free instead of being crucified. And as you may know, he didn't do it. He didn't use that authority. And instead, he allowed him to be not only crucified, but beaten to inches of his life before he was crucified, and then crucified to die a terribly excruciating death of suffocation on the cross that was crucifixion in the Roman government. Listen, I don't know that you've ever experienced some kind of power abuse at that level. You probably haven't. But just imagine for a moment if the governor of a state was uncovered to have known that someone was innocent on death row and still allowed the state to go through the execution, allowed this man to suffer innocently for something that he did not do. That's exactly what happened with Pontius Pilate and Jesus Christ. Pontius Pilate actually believed that Jesus was innocent. He was convinced of it. In fact, we're told that he was convinced that they wanted to crucify him for no other reason except envy. And so Pilate was in a really tough spot because Pilate was in a place to keep peace. Pilate was not a bloodthirsty man. Pilate was in a place to keep peace, and he had been given a position of authority in order to keep that peace and to do the right thing whenever it came to the people. Now, like I said, you and I, we probably can't relate to something at that level, but chances are pretty good we've all experienced some place where in life someone had the ability and the authority to help us or to save us from trouble or to come to our rescue, and they didn't use it. You know, maybe your boss could have put people in their place at work and didn't, and you suffered because of it. Maybe you were due some money from a company or from a neighbor or from business somehow, and there was somebody in a position that could have helped you if they had really pressed the issue, but they weren't willing to press the issue. You know, maybe there was an authority figure in your life in school, or maybe it was a parent, and there was some kind of abuse going on or bullying or something like that, and somebody could have done something, and they didn't. They let you down. They did not come to your aid. You know, these things do happen, and the wrong that's done could make anybody furious. It's incredible how it feels when somebody could lift a finger, could put their neck out there, could do something because it's right, and they just won't. How does somebody do that? How does somebody look past what's going on and just preserve themselves and watch out for their number one? How do they do that? Well, what I want to do this morning is take you on a little walk through what happened to Pontius Pilate. Because I'm telling you, what happened to Pontius Pilate is actually something that happens with ordinary people every single day. You, me, everybody. It's not just a you and me Christian thing. It's not a non-Christian thing. It's an everybody thing. It's a people thing. And it has everything to do with giving something away that should never be given away. Take a look with me at something that happened many years ago. We're going to look at a place in John, and in the Gospel of John, Jesus has been arrested. He's actually been taken over by the religious authorities, the priests and the elders, and to the chief priest. His name is Caiaphas. And John wrote that the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Now, Pilate is a smart guy. Pilate doesn't want this trouble. Pilate doesn't want anything to do with this because, as he well knows, his job is to keep the peace. and anything that might incite a rebellion or political unrest of any kind is a threat to not only his job, but to his own life, because in those days he might well stand trial for failing the emperor in this task. And the facts are that dead people don't pay taxes. So war's no good in this little outpost. So they respond to him. The crowd responds to him. They say, if he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. In other words, trust us. This is a bad guy. This is a bad dude. You know, if he wasn't really bad, we wouldn't be here talking to you right now. We don't like you. We don't like the Roman government. We don't want anything to do with you. It's Passover, by the way, so it's a religious holiday. We don't want anything to do with you. I'm telling you, if this wasn't serious, we wouldn't be here right now. That's how bad this is. Just trust us. He's a bad guy. Of course, Pilate doesn't want anything to do with this. He wants nothing to do with this. And so he says this, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. John 18:31. This is your responsibility. This is not me. Take this out of here. Get off my lawn with this. This isn't my problem. But then their response is this, but we have no right to execute anyone. Well, that was absolutely true. The Jews did not have the right to execute anyone since they were part of the Roman government now. They were given the ability to take care of their own small affairs, their misdemeanors, some of their felonies, but they could not execute anyone. That was too dangerous a thing to leave in their hands, so said the Roman government. So that was absolutely true. And so Pilate wants to know, well, what in the world did this guy do that he needs to be executed and executed right now? And this is their response. They say, he stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. You know, Pilate still is looking for opportunities to get out of this. And he hears the word Galilee. And he says, aha, this is a Galilean. He belongs to a jurisdiction that's overseen by a Jewish ruler, a puppet king named Herod. And he knew that Herod was in the city right then for the festivities, for their Passover festivities. And he says, okay, well, let's send him over to Herod, and we'll put this in Herod's hands, and we'll see how he does. So he goes to Herod, and of course, Herod doesn't really want a whole lot to do with it either. Jesus is very popular. And so Herod says, basically, he's amusing, but here you go. Have him. He's not my problem. And so Pilate is thinking, great, now that the actual Jewish man in charge doesn't want anything to do with him, we can just let this guy go. Finally, we can be done with this. Jesus comes back, and the crowd is looking for him to be crucified still. And Jesus explains himself to Pilate, because Pilate questions, and he asks, are you the king of the Jews? John 18:33. Are you the king of the Jews? Because you speak of a kingdom in all your talk. So you are a king, right? And Jesus does this amazing thing. I want you to not miss this. You cannot miss this. Jesus is amazing in this. He says this, is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me? It's beautiful. It's the most subtle way to say, Pilate, what do you think about this situation? This is your decision. What do you think about this? That's what matters here. That's what matters. What do you think? Because this is what you decide. Did your questioning me come from the questions of your own heart and convictions of your soul, or did they come from a crowd who's yelling things at you and wants you to do things and putting pressure on you, and they're threatening you with rebellion? Where did that come from? Of course, Pilate does his best to deflect in that moment. He says, am I a Jew? It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you've done? Don't put this on me. It's a total deflection. I'm not a Jew. I don't know enough about this Jewish stuff to be equipped to answer anything. I just need to know. Tell me, what did you do that made them so mad? This is really very little to do with me. I want nothing to do with this. And here's the thing. He talks with him more, and Jesus talks, and the more that Jesus talks, Pilate is more and more convinced that this really is a whole sham. This is wrong. This is a hoax. He comes out and says this, I find no basis for a charge against him. But here's an idea. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews or Barabbas? Of course, Barabbas is an actual criminal, an actual person responsible for causing loss of life. He'd led a rebellion, John had People died because of Barabbas. And Pilate is just hoping. He's just hoping above all hopes that he could just hear one name called out there, Jesus. Even if it was just like half a dozen people and the rest were crying for Jesus, Barabbas and Jesus. Come on, man, just give me a little something. Give me a Jesus out there somewhere so I can play this off and just say, oh, well, I hear Jesus out there, so Jesus it is. Jesus, go home. He's just hoping for an easy way out of this where he can make this crowd satisfied that he did everything that he could do to make this okay and to do the right thing. But they just won't have any of it. And they shout back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Barabbas. Give us Barabbas. John 18:40. Pilate still is looking for a way out of this. He needs to make this crowd satisfied in his own heart, but at the same time he's at war and he's beginning to wrestle that he's about to do something wrong in order to keep a crowd happy and satisfy one for the desires of a group. And so he has him beaten and beaten badly. It says they had him flogged and they had him beaten within inches of his life, almost unrecognizable, we're told. Thinking maybe if they just see how bad it is, I can make them happy, but I can still save his life. That would be all right. I could win in that way. I don't want to kill this man. At least I could save that much. So he has him beaten to inches of his life and brings him back out. And his hopes are dashed because, as it was written, as soon as the chief priests saw him, as soon as they saw him again, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate is running out of options in his own mind. He says, you take him and crucify him. I find no basis for a charge. But they won't have it. They want blood, and they're not going to stop. They're not going to give up. There's really nothing that he can say or do to get them to go home without this man dying and have them be satisfied. There's just nothing that he's been able to do that's worked up to this point. So he speaks to Jesus again, hoping that Jesus can feed him something, anything that he can use to get out of this. He says, where do you come from? No answer. Jesus is not in good shape at this point. And he says again, he presses him, he says, don't you realize, listen to this, don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? And Jesus responds, and listen to this, listen to what's in this. He says, you would have no power over me if it were not given you from above. In other words, yes, you do have the power to free me or crucify me. You do have that decision, and actually that responsibility was given to you by someone else who you will have to answer to. He goes on to say, therefore the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin. In other words, you were given a job to do by someone far, far above you. And you really can't get out of that. That's been given to you. That's been ordained on you. You have to be in this position at this moment. You were chosen for it. You have no way out. The other guy who turned me in, he could have walked away at any point. And he didn't. He could have just left. He could have just walked off and disappeared with many of the other people who disappeared. But instead, he chose to betray me, to sell me for money, for 30 silver coins. So he's very, very guilty. By comparison, you're just a shade, just a little bit of a shade less guilty than that. But you're still guilty. And John wrote that from that moment, from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. That was too much for Pilate. That was incredibly impacting, even for a man who'd never really considered God as a father or considered any of this Jewish background stuff before. There was something in that of truth that was too much for him, and it motivated him. And he said, I have to find a way to let this guy free. I have to get out of this somehow. There's got to be a way to do this. And so he comes back out. He says, I find no basis for a charge. They don't give an inch. And Matthew wrote, and this is the moment that you need to pay attention to, because it's important to you if you have a moment of responsibility right now. It says, he pulled out a bowl of water, and he washes his hands symbolically in front of everybody, like this. And he says, I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility. Possibly the most pathetic abdication that's ever taken place. He carries the responsibility of the decision. He carries the authority. There's no one, literally no one in the vicinity that can force him to do anything except what he believes is right. And yet he says, fine, I'm going to decide to do what you want to do because you're pushing so hard. We're going to do it your way. He freely gives away the right of the authority of his own job in order to keep this group happy. You guys put me in a position where I can't win. So if this goes bad, it's on you. We'll just see how this goes. I'm not responsible for this anymore. I would ask you this question. What does God put you in authority over in your life? You. Now, maybe you don't feel like you have a ton of authority. It's easy to feel that way. It is, unless you have some, high-level position at work or some such. But listen, there are many places in your life where you are in a position of authority. It may be with kids. It may be with a situation at work. It may be that you work on behalf of your clients or your customers and in some kind of position. There are so many places in life where when it comes down to it, something is either going to happen or it's not going to happen, and it all comes down to whether or not you decide to sign off on it. You may not feel powerful in a moment, but the truth is it's going to come back to whether or not you decided yay or nay. Will I use my power and influence to support this, or will I use my power and influence to do nothing and effectively just give away this decision to the people I'm here in authority over? What I want to tell you is that it's so tempting. You know this. It's so tempting to give away your authority when you feel like there's no way to win and keep everybody satisfied. And it feels like they're pressuring you. They're making you do something that you don't want to do. They're using emotional manipulation. They're threatening you with what they're going to do. They're doing subtle little things. They're telling you, informing you what's going to happen if they decide to go a different route and do this other thing, and you're going to have to pay for it somehow. I mean, sometimes the threats are real. Sometimes the threats are really, really real. But the fact of the matter is, the reason that you're receiving the pressure and the reason that you're receiving the threats and the reactions is because someone is powerless to make you do the thing that they want you to do. You actually have a position of authority. And for that reason, you should not just give that away and abdicate. Don't abdicate. Abdication's kind of a big word. It's a $10 word, but abdication basically means to just voluntarily give away your ability to oversee a situation, your power, your authority that you've been given. Sometimes kings would do it if they felt the responsibility was too difficult, too heavy. Don't abdicate the position of authority in the place that you've been given by God. Remember, when Pilate was talking with Jesus, Jesus said, "You were given this power that you have to make a decision, and you're answerable to someone above you." That so convicted Pilate. It convicts me. It probably convicts you at some level. Where did God put you? Where did God put you? And who is counting on you to rise to the occasion? The truth is, nobody can actually make you give away your ability to decide. After all, if God has decided to choose you and put you in a place to be a gatekeeper, then nobody can take that from you unless you give it away freely, the way that Pilate did. No one looks back at Pilate's story and says, well, Pilate just had no choice. At no point, as I said before, did Pilate ever have the power stripped from him by the yelling crowd, the threatening crowd, the mob. No time at all was there a place that happened. Every step of the way, from the beginning to the end, Pilate carried the power to say yes or no. Pilate carried the power to say, go home, this is ridiculous. Go home. We don't execute by lynch mob and the Roman government. We don't do that here, okay? This is a place of law and order. Everybody go home, crowd dismissed. He could have done that at any point. But he wasn't willing, because he wasn't willing to pay the cost of the risk that comes with doing the right thing in place of the wrong thing with his position of authority. So I want to challenge you this morning. Are you a gatekeeper for something? Are you a gatekeeper for your children? Are you a gatekeeper for some people at work that you're there to support and be there for and guide and teach? Are you a gatekeeper somewhere else in your family maybe? Are you a gatekeeper at school? Are you a gatekeeper at a college? Are you in charge of something? Do you have a position of influence? You may not even have a job. That doesn't matter. You may be in a position of influence right in your own social circle. And you know, if you think about it enough, you realize that there are things that will be said and there are things that will stop based upon your reaction in your own social circle. If you decide to say, you know what, I'm not down with this, I'm not going along with this, I'm not supporting this, you realize that pretty much everybody else would just back off. And it's really coming down to you, even though you don't have a position or a title. Where has God put you in charge? What are you a gatekeeper of? What if there is somebody right now that's counting on you to be a gatekeeper for something that really, really matters? What if somebody is praying to God right now for help in a situation, and you're the gatekeeper of the help? What if somebody is at the will of some big organization, and you're actually the cog in that organization that God has placed on purpose to be the one to say, yes, no. I will pursue this. I will chase this down. I will get justice for this person. I will go after that. What if you're that person? What if you believed that you were actually the person that person is praying will come to their aid as a follower of Jesus Christ? Think about that this week. And I really, really challenge you to pray about that and take some ownership of that, because everybody, I'm telling you, has been put in a position on purpose by God to be the one to say yes or no to something, to be a gatekeeper of something. I also want to say a word to you of encouragement, because as I say these things, you know, things come to mind. Our past comes up, our failures, our successes come up, and many of us feel like we have more failures than successes, let's be honest. Okay? Let's think about that for a second. Is it unsalvageable? Did you do something that you can never go back and fix? Is it just over? Do you feel like there's just no point? You failed so badly, there's nothing you can do to recover? I just want to say one thing to you. If God thought it was over, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in anymore. And the fact that you are still in a position to be a gatekeeper for justice, a gatekeeper for compassion or consideration or for payment or for just treatment, mercy of something, the fact that you're still in the positions that you are in, wherever those positions are, is a cue to you that God has not given up on you yet. You're still where you're at because God plans to use you, and the time is still there. Life's not over. Life is short, but you're still here listening to me, and that means there's time. So I'm going to end this morning by praying for me and all of you out there that are watching. If you just join with me in a spirit of prayer, and I'm not sure if I've convinced you of all of this, but I just want to pray, and I'm inviting you to jump in and join, and I'll just lead off. God, right where we are today, staying at home, quarantined, out and about, listening to this on the YouTube app on our radio or our phone, whatever it is, God, join us together in this thought that you have put us where we are, exactly where we are, to be gatekeepers on behalf of someone else. And it is difficult to do the right thing sometimes. Sometimes it seems like there's no way to win. Yet you call us to do the right thing even when there isn't a way to win. In the end, you've convinced us that doing the right thing is the win, no matter what. So God, I just pray for me and all of us here in the studio today and all of us out here at home, just kind of sitting and laying low today, thinking about what to do with ourselves for all this time. God, that you would use this moment right now to convince us that we have been given a position. It was on purpose, and you intend to do something remarkable for someone, to answer somebody's prayers through our decision to follow you and stay committed. And I just pray one last thing out there. For those of us who are out there today, just thinking about this and imagining how difficult it is to do the right thing sometimes, that we'd remember that you said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father through me. If we're trying to figure out how to do the right thing without actually having your personal help with us, present with us, calling on you and saying, we're weak, we can't do this all on our own, we can't come up to this standard on our own. We're right when we think that. And I just pray we would remember those words, that they'd be written in stone somewhere in our minds. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the ultimate gatekeeper to a relationship with the Father that has peace and health. God, I pray that you'd help us pray that prayer this morning. If we've never prayed that before, I'm going to pray with you now. Father, take me right where I am right now. Take me where I am and persuade my heart, convince me that you really do want to use me, that you really did create me with a purpose, that I am here for a reason. And although I haven't seen all the fruit of that yet, you have an intention to take me somewhere I've never been before, a lifestyle of peace, true peace, where my heart can rest at night knowing that although I am weak, I am strong because of the way that you have come into my life, forgiven me, and are going to use me as a part of the greater kingdom of the family, where I can feel purpose and rest and real joy, maybe for the first time. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. Thanks for listening, everybody. Listen, if you like this message, feel free to share it on Facebook. We'll be sending this recorded message out by a YouTube link in an email for those of you who are members at Faith Fellowship Church. Like the thing, share it with somebody this morning, and we're going to be joining you a little bit later today with some announcements and things. But like this, share it if you want to get the word out. And I'm going to see you again next Sunday, same time, same place.